Good afternoon. Just turned afternoon here on the west coast of the United States. Um, and it looks like the sun is out, at least for a little while, at the Kennedy Space Center. It's been kind of a stormy morning, it looks like. But it also looks like the crews at Launch Pad 39B have been able to uh, do a lot of the, I guess, quote unquote, big steel moves. And so I can run through that. I'll run through that here a little bit. But what I wanted to do at the top today was um, was go through kind of the outline of what's going to happen, and I'll sort of work my way back to these bullet points here. But these are some of the questions, and I think some of them we can kind of rule out or rule in at this, or well, rule out. Um, but these are kind of some of the big picture and little picture questions. I mean, this is I try and deal with both of those on this channel. But I obviously the big picture question is when could they be ready to launch again? Is there enough time for them to pick up, roll back to the VAB, do all of the quote unquote stuff they need to do there, and then roll back out, and not all of the things, but a lot of the things that they've been doing over the last couple of days, that they've backed out of, they are then going to have to redo when they come back out to the pad. So the is it, is it possible for them to do all of that uh, in the next 6 weeks, maybe 5 weeks? Seems like a long time, but considering how, all of this stuff is very time consuming work. And so that's obviously one of the big picture questions. And then, underneath that, they've talked about indication of where they're seeing this issue in the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, the ICPS, but we really don't, I don't know that, well, they have not shared how confident they are in what they know about what broke and what didn't. I mean, again, I've sort of heard some whispering that makes it sound like, the biggest hurdle here is just they just don't have access to this at the pad. But we shall see when they get back to the VAB how easy or how quickly they can resolve this. But some of the other more of the little scale questions, at least the ones that I've thought of so far, are where they are going to have to reset the flight termination system. They were planning to do that for these March launch dates that are coming up. But they weren't able to do that, and they're going to have to do that at some point before they launch. And so they would have the opportunity to do that in the vehicle assembly building, or they could do it at back when they come back out to the pad. I think hopefully they will address that. And there may be pros and cons in terms of how that helps them timing wise, or it may just be an academic exercise and they're like, we have much better access in the VAB, so we're just going to do it in the VAB. But they have not. That's something that they'll need to address. And then the next thing that I'd put in here, I think we could probably rule this out at this point, because they're talking about rolling back on Tuesday. And so whether that means, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, or overnight Tuesday into Wednesday, that's probably not enough time for them to clear the pad and offload the solid rocket booster hydraulic power unit hydrazine tanks. There are 2 sets, so a total of 4, 2 in the left booster aft skirt, 2 in the right booster aft skirt. It doesn't sound like they're going to do that, but it seems like, given the amount of time remaining between now and Tuesday, that they've opted to just leave the hydrazine on board. And the flip side of that is that by doing that, then that will save them whatever, either 2 or 3 shifts when they get back to the pad, because if they offload it, then they're going to have to reload it. But I guess the question there is, is that are there any, I suppose are, it makes things maybe a little bit there's a little bit more safety measures that you have to take, but there is hydrazine elsewhere on the vehicle. Most of it's up. The ICPS has its own hydrazine tanks. The crew module has them. The Orion service module has a different type of hydrazine that's used for bipropellant. But so that question at least seems it would still be okay I'd be happy to get a confirmation that they didn't do that, because it'll then become a question again when they get back out to the pad. But then I think some of these ones are maybe easier given what's happened in February questions, and I think these will probably be popular questions, which is, are they going to do what they just did after the first wet dress rehearsal when they get back out to the pad, which is to disconnect the tail service mast, not just the liquid hydrogen tail service mast umbilical plates, and then refresh them, remate them. The things that they talked about doing in the middle of February were, they demate the plates, they replaced the Teflon seals for the 2 liquid hydrogen propellant lines in the plate. Again, the 8-inch fill and drain line and the 4-inch engine bleed line. And that seemed to be very effective when they did the second wet dress rehearsal this last Thursday. But they were I think they were, at least in the press conference the next day, which is only Friday, so only a couple of days ago. But they stopped short, at least for the questions that they got and the time that they got, because that was going to be one of my questions, was will you do this demate and then remate the plates, replace or refresh the seals the next time another SLS vehicle comes out to the pad, or not? Or at least, are you considering doing that? And so now, because of this, they're going to have to consider this, or maybe not, but it would seem like that's a question now for this Artemis II vehicle, because they're rolling back, and they're going to roll back, and then they're going to roll out to the pad again. And then I guess kind of coupled with that would be what kind of tanking tests they might do when they come back to the pad, if any. And so those are, you would think, again, if there's a concern now about the rollout loads on the liquid hydrogen tail service mast umbilical plates, or on those quick disconnects specifically, then would they consider? Is that something that they're strongly considering, or is it? We didn't really. I think they were hoping to punt those questions until after Artemis II. They got through the second wet dress rehearsal, and for that short window in time before whatever broke on ICPS broke, I think they were like, let's go ahead and launch this, and we'll worry about those things later. Well, it seems like they're going to have to worry about those now. So those are some of the questions I think going into this next month or so of trying to recycle things, turn the vehicle around. So they got to go back into the VAB, fix whatever broke on ICPS. They're probably going to have to do some other work in the VAB, but they probably don't want to open the vehicle up very much. The more you open the vehicle up and dig into the systems, the longer it's going to take then to button everything back up and come back out. So I do think, again, that this top question up here, even if they don't do a lot of work, if the scope of work in the VAB is relatively small, I think we don't have a timeline, even a preliminary timeline. And so it is, I think, a question about, how good a chance they've preserved. It sound, the press release say that they've preserved. There's still a possibility of doing that, but how good or how bad of a possibility is that? So, Let me go back and I'll bring up the live shot of the vehicle, but let me go back to the top here of the outline. Of course I lost the picture. Well, I'll just go ahead and just go take back to the top. So kind of where things stand right now. So they have an issue with the interim cryogenic propulsion stage pneumatics. And so this is the helium is used for another thing that helium is used for, because of the engine. I believe that it is also used for actuating, for valve actuation, for the RL10 engine, in addition to tank pressurization. Maintaining the tank pressurization, purges of the engines, purges of the lines. Helium is very popular. The core stage uses it for its pneumatics, for its main propulsion system pneumatics as well. Again, it's likely in large part due to the hydrogen, but also it tends to be used for these types of applications. So something broke. They can't fix it at the pad, so they're going to roll the vehicle back to the VAB. They posted a relatively short update about going on more than 90 minutes now, but they did say in the update that they're could roll back as soon as Tuesday. If you wanted to go out and see this, or if you were I'm not going to be covering this in person, same as this last wet dress rehearsal, but we'd need to get a little bit better idea. This is again one of those things about when you say by 2028 for landing for Artemis II, do you mean January 1st, 2028 or December 31st, 2028? And so in this case, do they mean triple balls 1, so 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday, or 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday? Or do they mean 12:01 a.m. on Wednesday, which is, I guess, still euphemistically Tuesday night? So still have to narrow that down a little bit. I don't know that there's they did mention here that the crew was released from quarantine yesterday, and again, obviously this because what happened broke so fast and furious, so to speak. I think everybody, except for the people who are troubleshooting it overnight, Friday into Saturday, everybody woke up thinking March 6th, and within 12 hours, everybody's no longer thinking March 6th. And so, and then the other thing that obviously I'll be curious about is when in the coming days that media event will happen. But there's that's the sort of the long and short of that update. So we still have these questions. There's a number of things they could do in the vehicle assembly building. Probably want to keep that number relatively low, but then the big picture question is about schedule. How much margin do they have for launch period 19? I think a lot of people were like, well, we don't want to, let's just think about February and March. Well, those are off the table now. So I cut and paste this out of one of the availability PDFs. So this is the down here. Actually, April 30th is actually part of launch period 20. So it does, because it's based on the lunar month versus the calendar month. You'll see this sort of you'll see that start to happen. You'll start to see the back end of one launch period and the front end of the next one within a particular calendar month. But right now we're just talking about early April, and these would be the opportunities. So there would be these would all be the nights. So the night of April Fool's night, I guess if you would say, but the night of the 1st, and then there's a day cut out of there that's possibly an Orion cutout, like an eclipse constraint or some other non SLS performance constraint. So then the nights of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th are available, at least within the night local time at the Kennedy Space Center, which is Eastern. And actually, oh, that's right. We're going to go through the time change here. So by the time we get here, it will be Eastern Daylight Time again, which I believe is UTC minus 4 hours. So, so then next, so to speak. So this is sort of overall what has to happen. Whoops. Overall what has to happen. So they have to get ready to roll back. Obviously, if they're talking about Tuesday, a couple more days of that to complete. Roll back. Once you get into the VAB, they will extend platforms. Well, once they get, the very first thing that happens is the crawler will set the mobile launcher down on the pedestals in High Bay 3, but then they'll extend platforms, get access to the specific parts of the vehicle. Let me see if I should bring up the picture of the platforms in the VAB, which is something we go to relatively frequently. Zoom in a little bit. Whoops, keep clicking on the wrong thing. So the platforms, I mean, I would imagine all 3 of these platforms are going to be extended, and they may extend even more of them just for, I think just as a matter of practice. So I would expect these platforms to be extended at the very least, C, D, and E, and then also very likely they will be extending platform F. And if they decide to sort of defer the decision about the flight termination system reset, they're still probably going to want to go in and establish access for the engine section and the tail service mast umbilicals, or they can actually access those by setting up scaffolding and platforms on the deck of the mobile launcher itself. So that'll be the setup. They're going to open up the flight doors in the launch vehicle stage adapter, because the actual part of the intercryogenic propulsion stage is in that volume. But then the big picture is ICPS repairs, but what else? They're probably going to have to replace some flight batteries. Again, the question is, are they going to reset the flight termination system? But then assuming that they can get all of that, they are going to get it done. It's just a question of how long it takes. They'll do the repairs in the ICPS. They'll retest, make sure that that's good. Assuming that again, we're just sort of getting these feelers that the problem is the bigger problem is access to this part that's broken. Then that it's going to take a long time. But we will see if that pans out or not. But assuming that it does, they will reinstall, take all of the access platforms out, reinstall the flight doors, retract the platforms, and get ready to roll back out to the pad. And then, unfortunately, and the reason that it takes so long is they're going to basically have to go through almost the entire pad flow again when they go back out. So in terms of the rollback preps, these are some of the things that we saw yesterday and today. And I'll go ahead and so they removed the one contingency pad access platform. They released the emergency egress system baskets, but now they have to pull the slide wires down themselves. Again, the question about the solid rocket booster hydrazine deservicing, it sounds like that's going to just be deferred. This morning, in that there was a period of a decent amount of activity this morning, I think Kennedy Space Center time, where they repositioned the side flame deflectors and extensible columns from, I guess, from launch position to park position. They did the same thing with the engine and booster service platforms. Those were positioned, those were in launch position, and those have been rolled back underneath the flame hole for the mobile launcher, and they're being lifted back into place. Those will ride with the mobile launcher back to the vehicle assembly building. And then what we'll be looking for is a crawler transporter to see the crawler transporter, and the leveling checks that I have there on one of the Artemis I rollbacks. I believe they got delayed by they had issues with the leveling of the crawlerway on the pad 39B ramp, so to speak, the grade that they go up from the elevation of the pad gate up to the pad surface. So let me see if I can bring up the live view. So this part, there were some areas on the crawlerway tracks that were not level enough, and if I recall correctly, they had to use the crawler itself to level those out. So that would, again, it's just a question of, is that something that needs to be done before it can pick the vehicle and the mobile launcher up and bring it back to the VAB. So let me go ahead and so this morning, so this was yesterday. So this is the contingency pad access platforms. So the crane, this is I think this is 60 times speed, although somewhat of severe trivia, but you can see here, I should have probably clicked ahead a little bit more. So we're gonna waste like 15 seconds here, but you'll see that it's disconnected from the umbilical tower, and then the crane lowers it back down onto, I don't know if it's a flatbed truck or whatever, but so that happened maybe a little bit less than 24 hours ago, but obviously after the decision, the decision was made. I don't know how much we got. So then now this is this morning. So you can see, so the first thing I think that moves are these two the side flame deflectors, which are, and the extensible columns are attached to those. And so let me see if I can, so if you click, so okay, there, I clicked and you can see the one on the left move a little bit, and then the one on the right, see if I click far enough ahead, it moves. But so anyway, and so you can also see some of the weather. Pardon me. This is why they wanted to pull the contingency pad access platform down. Similar to weather constraints for rolling out and rolling back. The vehicle is the vehicle hard down on the pad here can withstand. It can deal with more severe weather, and the platforms are rated to withstand higher winds. But when you're actually lifting it, then you have much tighter weather constraints. And so it was like, well, we either have to leave it up here for the weather, or we have to take it down before it. And you can see one of the lightning tower elevators there. But then the next, did I skip it? They released the slide wire baskets. Okay, no, they're still up there. So they released those. They're up here, and you'll see them go at some point. But then they also moved. This is the engine and booster service platforms, and those were, rolled up the slope underneath the mobile launcher. And so this all happened before. I don't know if it's before, but you can see a little bit of activity around that. There go the slide wires or the baskets themselves, and you can see the wires there. Those will have to be taken down. That may, that'll probably be something that'll be going on in the next day or so, depending on weather. And then you could see again very quickly after that the engine service platform is rolled underneath the rolled into the over the flame trench and positioned underneath the flame hole. And if watching it, they have to, I believe, raise the booster platforms and the engine platform separately, or it's a two-step when you're raising those up. So, and you can start to see the weather deteriorate. And I don't think when this cut, I can't remember if this cut. So not quite. The weather was getting worse. So, but then it has come and gone. At least there's a couple of lines of showers rolled through Central Florida a couple of hours ago. So that's a lot of this is almost or is in the process of being completed. So I think next what we'll be looking for is to see the crawler. Tomorrow's Monday. We might not see the crawler until tomorrow, probably not until tomorrow. Again, it depends on whether we're talking about early Tuesday or late Tuesday for rollback. So, and then the final thing, and that'll happen very quickly. Well, that's not true, but it will happen right before the crawler picks the mobile launcher up. They will disconnect. And it's possible that the crawler will actually be positioned to lift the mobile launcher before they actually disconnect it from the pad services. But that'll happen one on top of the other, relatively speaking, within hours. They'll disconnect the mobile launcher from the pad services. The crawler transporter will pick it up off the pedestals, and then they'll go. And obviously it depends on weather. So, but then the next step, rollback's going to take the same as rollout, somewhere between 8 to 12 hours. But then really this is some of the questions that we're going to be asking is, and I'll try and go through this relatively quickly because these are just questions, and we'll just have to see what else they're going to do. We know that they have to do whatever they have to fix whatever's broken on ICPS, and then remove and replace, repair and replace, retest, and then the question is what else do they need to do? And obviously this right behind that would be how long do you think that's going to be, and then turn around and reconfigure. So reconfigure the vehicle from a servicing and maintenance to a ready for launch configuration, because it's the opposite of the reason that the reason that they had to roll this vehicle back is because they configure it for launch for the most part in the vehicle assembly building. So they have to take a lot of these things out of launch configuration. So they aren't going to, in theory, not going to have to touch Orion to any degree, but the ICPS, they're going to have to take out of launch configuration to fix whatever broke, and then they're going to have to reconfigure it for launch again. So again, so what else do they need to do? And then you go back out to the pad, and I think the thing we can say about the second pad flow is, there are quite a few questions here, but they probably, assuming they're not going to deservice the solid rocket booster hydrazine, they won't have to reservice it when they get back out, and that would save them probably upwards of a whole day, perhaps up to 3 shifts of time. And while they're doing that, they have to clear the pad because it's hydrazine. So so they will have to come back out. They'll have to obviously connect the services up, redo the pad validations. They will have to reset up the emergency egress system slide wires, and then take the baskets up and I would imagine we're probably going to see them do some release tests. They will have time to do that independently of pad validations. All of the things that we were looking at this morning, the engine booster service platforms, the big steel, so the extensible columns, side flame deflectors, all of that stuff will all the things that they undid today, they will have to redo. So everything that was taken out of launch position will have to be put back into launch position. And then you have these other questions, which are they going to, they'll have to decide this, I think, before they get to the pad, which is, are they going to disconnect the liquid hydrogen tail surface mast umbilical and then refresh the seals and remate it? And if so, or if not, are they also going to do some kind of tanking test? And so again, there are different types of tanking tests, and we saw that in the last week or so. So they did this partial liquid hydrogen loading of just the core stage liquid hydrogen tank. They had an issue there, but they were talking about going to maybe 25% or maybe 50% full, because that would give them, some level of confidence in the seals. If you're seeing and Charlie Blackwell Thompson talked about the percentages, the hydrogen concentration percentages they were seeing in this last wet dress rehearsal on Thursday. And so I think I think they'll have to decide whether they only want to do that, or do they want to do an all up full wet dress rehearsal like they did on Thursday. And then the countdown demonstration test part 2, again, I don't know that they ever got a chance to do that with the crew. It's possible that they did. And then the other question would be, where did they decide to reset the flight termination system? So again, maybe it's probably easier to do it in the vehicle assembly building, but then you have to do it within a certain period of time. Again, there's more orchestration and more choreography in terms of the timing of that test. It basically has to happen right before you roll out from the VAB, whereas in theory, since they've never actually done it at the pad, they would have a little bit more flexibility in when they do that. But then you also have these issues of, again, you can only have so much wind to when you set the platforms up, et cetera, et cetera. So that's again, I think we're just going to be asking them what are they deciding to do there. So here we are back. I think here we are back kind of that question page again of, do they have enough time? What broke on ICPS? Where are they going to reset the flight termination system? And then are they going to do this tail service mast umbilical workaround's not the right thing to call it, but what are they going to do? Are they going to do the same thing they did after the leak that they had in early February? And then if they do that, are they going to do a tanking test? Are they going to do one or the other, or are they going to do both? So, and this is obviously not a complete list of questions, but these are just some of the ones that I thought of. So, I'll go back to and so I think, I think that's kind of where I got to in sort of the last 24 hours since we did the emergency podcast after this broke yesterday, that they went from, again, I think somebody said within about 12 hours they went from great job on the second wet dress rehearsal, March 6th is, there a lot of confidence in March 6th to rollback. So anyway, that's kind of the overview. And so again, I'll scroll back and see what other questions you guys had. But if you have any questions, obviously throw those in chat, and I'll I'll see what I can, again, I don't know whether I can answer these or not. Some of these questions, I think you guys have some of the same questions that we have. And so it's just really is a matter of getting those questions to the right people and finding out what their thoughts are on it right now. So, and so it's, we talked about this yesterday in the live stream about not having pad access to the system. And, I don't know that anything's changed from yesterday, which is that it's just, they have minimal infrastructure for this vehicle. And for, and so, I think one of the things I don't know that I mentioned, yesterday, but if you look at again, this is that kind of thing, look at the budgets for, SLS, the SLS program, the Orion program, and the Exploration Ground Systems program, and obviously look at the magnitude of the budgets on an annual basis. And so it goes SLS, somewhere over 2 billion, again, I'm averaging, especially this decade. Orion is usually over $1 billion, but has kind of been, if you average it out, it's probably around $1 billion, maybe a little bit more than $1 billion, but close. And then Exploration Ground Systems actually kind of fluctuates all over the place between 500 million to 900, 800 million. And so it's just, infrastructure is just one of those sort of Achilles heels for Congress and the government. It has to be, NASA is kind of straddling the military industrial complex. So, the money that goes there is, the contractors, the relationship there in a way is just the contractors. So the big military contractors end up doing this stuff, but this is not nearly as lucrative. And the flip side of that being that Congress doesn't spend nearly amount of money on this. And so, again, and they don't want to. And so that's why they're moving to commercial, is because they're just like, okay, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, if you guys want to build these systems on your own, we'll just rent them. We'll rent them to take a ride to the moon and come back. So we will see. I mean, it is possible, and that's something else that we talked about, where maybe Congress decides to go ahead and rent those rental cars, so to speak, but they still decide to keep this system and use it, as much as they're using it now. Maybe a little bit more. I think they it's again just this weird place of, they have these goals, but then they don't. But then the goals and the resources rarely match. So this is, I think, one of the consequences of that. So, and so there was, I think at some point I'll have to go pull my notes on this. So what happened when the first time the Artemis I vehicle rolled out to the pad? This is the very first time that they'd had a full Orion SLS vehicle, in particular the SLS vehicle, at the pad. And so a lot of lessons learned. And so what they did for that is, the plan was roll out, do the wet dress rehearsal, roll back to the VAB, do the last, this was the flight termination system thing for Artemis I, do the final configurations of that, and then roll back out for launch. And so this was, this sort of slid into the beginning of 2022 at the time. And so what happened during that first period at the pad, which was late March to sort of through April 2022, was at some point, if I recall correctly, they had they were configuring some of the pneumatics between the ground and the vehicle and mobile launcher systems, and a gasket got blown out, sort of broken apart, and blown into the ICPS main propulsion system plumbing, and some of it got lodged on a check valve. And so they were seeing flow through that valve when it's supposed to be closed. So it's sort of the opposite, I guess, of what they were seeing yesterday, which is they were seeing restricted flow yesterday when they wanted to see full flow. And restricted could mean anything from not as much as they wanted to nothing at all. I don't think we got any qualitative. We didn't get any more detail than that. But anyway, if I recall correctly, they could not access that. It was there. I think it had something. The umbilical arm itself, or the umbilical connections themselves, were a part of that. Again, we just don't know. We don't know how similar the situations were. I wouldn't imagine that the root cause of the problem is the same, but we just don't know. But they did have some issue with the ICPS, and what ended up happening is, and then it was what would you call it? It was just other events. It was sort of overtaken by other events. So when they had what happened, the consequence of that issue with the Artemis I vehicle was they wanted to do this full wet dress rehearsal of the vehicle and load the ICPS just like they would on launch day, and that problem prevented them from doing that. So they were going to just do a core stage only tanking or a partial ICPS tanking, and then they ran into the hydrogen tail service mast issues, and then they ran into the whole Kennedy Space Center Cape Canaveral site gaseous nitrogen supplier issues at the time. That fortunately seems to have been resolved. The nitrogen part, the tail service mast thing is still they're still dealing with that, but they did have some kind of an issue, and at the time it prevented them from fully loading the ICPS for a tanking test. And so in addition to the tail service mast umbilical plate issue back in April 2022, when they rolled back, they also absolutely had to roll back at the time to deal with the ICPS issue because of the same overall thing. No access to that at the pad. So they came back and dealt with that. So, but that's how I remember that. Those issues back in, so it was April 2022. They rolled back second half of April 2022. I guess it was relatively, end of April, and then they rolled back out to the pad they came back out to do, they never were able to completely do that wet dress. They rolled back out, I think, early June, very early June. So it was about a month in the VAB to address the things that they wanted to address at the time. They rolled back out in early June 2022 after that. So. I think that extending the platforms, and they're split in half. I think I'm trying to think of the orientation, because I think they're referred to in terms of it's either north, south, or east, west. High Bay 3. So the vehicle, I think the vehicle is pointed east, west, and so I guess the platforms. The platforms would be, and then the platforms would be north south, if I have that right. It's sort of severe trivia, but I don't think it takes as long to extend them because you're not worried. Well, again, I'm assuming here, but you're not worried about clearances necessarily until you get up close to the vehicle. It's kind of like out at the pad where you have to connecting everything up is a little bit slower than disconnecting things. So like you see with, I was talking about this yesterday. So, you've got a 2-week pad flow to get the vehicle ready for a tanking test or a launch attempt. But if a hurricane comes and they have a threat of a hurricane and it's like, okay, drop everything, we got to get this back to the VAB. I think they're if they needed to, they could do that within 48 hours or something like that. So it's just easier because you're not having to verify that things are connected for launch. You're just disconnecting everything and getting out of Dodge. So it's a little bit more of, making sure when you're retracting the platforms, you don't want to strike the vehicle, and you also have to be careful about. But then once they get up there, yes. But I don't think it'll take that long for them to extend the platforms. That it might take them some part of a shift, I would imagine, but not that long. So yeah, that's the question. How long is it going to take? I mean, it's the same thing, same kind of concept as all of this stuff. So the actual repair, putting your hands on the part, I don't know how much forensics they have to do, whether they have to, they need hands on the systems to isolate it to a particular connector, or what exactly is broken. But the actual, taking the part out, replacing it is probably the fastest part of the whole process. It's getting the platforms extended, getting the scaffolding on top of that. Let me see if I can find. I think there was some, pardon me, some video of the vehicle just in the VAB during the summertime, and you can see how much scaffolding is required to. Was it here? I'm off by one. But they do have to set up some scaffolding on top of the platforms. No, this is the slow way to do it. Okay, so I was off by. I went the wrong direction. All right, so so let me I'll cue that. I'm queuing that up. But let me see. Let me go ahead and grab something else here, just again to visualize. Yeah, destack. I think destack would be. I'm struggling to think of a worse case scenario than destack. Uh, um, but and again, and that's I think it's we'll see. I mean, I what we're sort of hearing whispering, whisper wise, is it's something. I mean, I guess the best way to characterize it without knowing the difference between what happened with Artemis 1 and this unit. With Artemis 1, they were able to fix it relatively quickly in the VAB without having to destack. So the question here again is about what the opportunities are in April. So again, these are the opportunities here. So it's April 1st, and then there's a cutout for April 2nd. So it's April 1st, and then the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th of April. Those are the next possible opportunities to launch after March. And since March is ruled out, these are. So I mean, if again, the next absolute possible opportunities are in a couple of weeks, but they're not. They're going to be in the vehicle assembly building at that time. They're going to be working. Let's see. Actually, you know what? Well, I'll show it to you anyway, because there may be a view in here of the platforms around the launch vehicle stage adapter, but they're going to go inside the launch vehicle stage adapter. Let's see if So this is when it was stacked. Actually, this might work all by itself, because this was shot sort of during the stacking. Okay, so this is during the stacking. Oh, actually, that's not bad either. Just from a, so I just need to stop it. Just to give you an idea about what they need access to. We won't be seeing any of it, of course. But you can see, and we were talking about this yesterday, but you can see some of the black composite overwrapped pressure vessel bottles. You can see them here. There's many of them. And then you can see some of the pneumatic tubing that runs. The layout is very similar. I'm saying it backwards. So Exploration Upper Stage has a very similar layout to this stage, which makes sense since Delta was a Boeing vehicle, EUS is a Boeing vehicle, well, it is. I mean, again, a little bit different, but I mean, heritage-wise, Boeing's the prime contractor. EUS is still technically, it is a NASA design that Boeing is building for them, but they obviously collaborated with Boeing on that. But you were looking at, again, just to do this, so liquid oxygen tank, liquid hydrogen tank, and in between this is the mid body, and so they hang all of the. I mean, they're attached. They aren't hanging there, but the helium bottles are attached to the these X braces, or I don't know if they're called V struts on the ICPS 2, but they will. This is all sitting. All of this is sitting inside the launch vehicle stage adapter. And when you look, if you recall the in-flight video of ICPS separating from during Artemis I, this is what you're looking at from a camera inside the LVSA. But then if we go forward here, and in this video this is shot back in May of last year, so you can sort of see. Let me let this roll here. There's a shot for a minute, I think, where you're looking back into the LVSA. Well, you can get a little bit, so you're seeing the LVSA a little bit here, but then there's a little bit of edited footage. So this is well after they've. No, this isn't, but you can see that this goes it's lower down in here, and then at the very end there's a few seconds of footage here. So this is well after it's been lowered in place, but you can see. So this is what I was thinking of, but this is not what you want access to here. So these platforms and this scaffolding just gives you access to the top of the stage. So this is the liquid hydrogen tank, vent valve, some of the pneumatics, but all of the stuff that they're worried about will be on the platform below this. I think this is the C platform. Well, I should probably go back and look. Yeah, so this is now, and of course it. But I think this is C platform, and then. I think they give us a shot from the D platform. But this is good enough. This is the D. Nope. That's still the C platform. Let's see if they gave us a shot from the D platform. I'll probably have to find it then, because it looks like that's it. There is a. I'm trying to think, but that's where they will go. I can try and bring up the. Just for grins, let me load that other video from the summertime. Well, that might not be that. I mean, this is, even though you're looking from way above. No, you can't tell from this either. I keep fixating on because that's where the scaffolding is on the C platform, but really the platform would be this one here. It would be the D platform. that they'll be opening. And again, maybe they're not showing that on purpose because it's double secret probation stuff or something like that. They do work their way up the vehicle here, so I want to see if there was a little bit from. So this is the F platform where they would do the flight termination system reconfig. No, see now maybe they well, okay, that's probably as good as it gets, but you can see here this is one of the access doors. But again, I would take it that they would be going into this, and this is D platform, C platform, E platform. It is possible that they're going into the other ones, but I would suspect that they will have, again, on the back side from this view, there are several flight doors on there. They'll take them off, but they'll access the vehicle, and they're going to have other things to do. One of the things they may also have to reset are the ICPS flight computers. And again, depending on how much United Launch Alliance is willing to share, we may or may not get more than just yes, we're fixing the part that broke, but not necessarily wanting to talk about the other service and maintenance that they may have to do. So we'll just have to see. But in this case, this is actually instructive. In this case, in theory, at least this particular access door, they could, because of the location relative to the D platform itself, they could get into that. But then the flip side of it is that you then need to establish internal work platforms in there too, and then you don't want to fly with those. But there are some internal platforms, I think, that they have to, and it's like the ship in a bottle thing where you have to take those in and set those up. So that will probably take longer than extending these platforms that are split kind of in the middle here, and they're retracted up against the sides of the high bay. They'll extend them, but then they will have to open the flight doors up, and they will have to go in and set up internal platforms to safely access that equipment. So that, and then and they will at least have an idea about where they're going, assuming it's just a single point failure or a single thing that failed. That's an interesting question. How come SpaceX? How come it looks like SpaceX is, goes about it? It doesn't seem like there's as much involved in the service and maintenance of. Again, I don't know if you're talking about Starship or Falcon, because obviously the concept of operations for Falcon, and to some extent, or maybe to a great degree, with Starship, although it's different. But Falcon is horizontal assembly and checkout, and then it just rolls out. It's a lot similar to some of the heritage stuff, sort of between Starship today and Shuttle back in the day. Things moved back to sort of horizontal integration and checkout, and then you check the vehicle out, you roll it out, and you rotate it to vertical, fuel it, and launch it. So that's a little different than, this vehicle is a vertical, obviously, integration and checkout, test and checkout. So you end up with a different set of ways of doing this. And I think the other thing is just I think SpaceX took into consideration serviceability of the vehicle. I think this vehicle was designed to maximize performance, and so there are parts of the vehicle that are not perhaps optimized for serviceability. And so that might be one aspect, and then another aspect also might be again, some of the more uh, classic problems that people have with government uh, regulations and bureaucracy. So you might see some of there may be some of that where this is government facility, government machine, government infrastructure, government regulations, and so they may have additional regulations that they have to deal with. We've seen obviously how SpaceX has worked around that in Texas, for instance. So I don't think you see the same. NASA is not quite as confrontational with the rest of the government about that, but it also moves more slowly. I think again, if they thought they could get away with stuff, who knows? Maybe they would. But that's definitely part of it too. SpaceX is absolutely faster in with doing maintenance on things. I guess to be fair to NASA in one respect, this vehicle was designed, even with all the bureaucracy and the regulations, this vehicle's been designed all along to be crew rated. And so I do think if you're especially talking about Starship, if they haven't hurt anybody in testing mishaps, as far as I know. And they certainly haven't hurt any crew on board any of the Starships because they're all uncrewed vehicles. But I think they may have to be a little bit more measured in the way that they do things when they start flying crews. But we'll see. Now you have to again the other thing you have to comparing Apollo and Saturn to SLS. You have to remember 1960s dollars versus 2025 dollars. So actually, Apollo and Saturn were more expensive than SLS is. So well, and again, I'm using SLS euphemistically, but it's the same thing with Apollo. So you've got Apollo command and service modules development, lunar module development, Saturn 1, Saturn 1B, Saturn 5 development, and then obviously that program had all the initial infrastructure costs. And so again, this goes back to the infrastructure thing again. Vehicle, so design and construction of the vehicle assembly building, crawler transporters, Kennedy Space Center, all of that stuff was built for Apollo. And so the price tag would, if Congress had been asked to do this, to do Apollo today, they probably have been asked, so to speak, they wouldn't do it. So Apollo was Apollo in totality was much more expensive because it was obviously much more audacious, and the scope of it was just much larger than what they're doing. Again, you could make the argument. Again, if you look at what SpaceX is doing philosophically, and same thing with Blue Origin to some extent, I think they believe that it is not just more cost effective to start over with to build your infrastructure, purpose-built infrastructure for the vehicles, as opposed to retrofitting old infrastructure, which is what NASA and Congress have done basically since Apollo. They've been unwilling to, even though it might be more cost effective to get rid of this infrastructure and then build from scratch purpose-built infrastructure. They just don't do that. And in some cases, they don't build any infrastructure at all. Well, you'll need to go. You'll ask Chat GPT for the source of their numbers. So that this is the problem with all of the bots is uh, you they need to show all of their work as opposed to just assimilating uh, assimilating source material. And again, it isn't even necessarily primary source material, but you have to look at the primary source material. Let me see if I can find the graph. Uh, so just as an example of the, let's see if this, nope, that's, can't use that one. Let's see if I can, should be able to bring this up. I just have to get it to the right. I just need to get the right screen up. That one. Oh, it did come up. That's interesting. So, so this is the Apollo. This is the Apollo. This is the Apollo singularity. And it actually, again, it comes down very quickly. But if you look at the budgets, again, adjusted for, this is from the Planetary Society. So again, these are budget justifications, but still, you can see that, yes, when NASA was founded, or, I'm not sure if that's founded is the right word, but NASA Act, I think, was originally 1958. But you can obviously see, so Kennedy's speech, end of May 1961, which would have been, I think, just ahead of fiscal year 1962 at the time. But you can see what happened. And you can also see, again, how quickly it ramped down then. And so by, Shuttle was developed out here. Whoops, wrong window. But you can see it's been relatively flat since Apollo. And I mean, so again, so Saturn, they built 15 Saturn V vehicles, and they ended up not flying two of them. I mean, there are stages probably beyond that, but still, again, you can see the difference between Apollo and again, the other thing that the other difference between Apollo and the other programs is front loading the funding. And so the peak funding, it came down very quickly, would have been fiscal year. And in fiscal years back in the Budget Bureau days, were the fiscal years were aligned on July to July. And then they moved at some point. I can't remember if it was coincident with when Budget Bureau moved to Office of Management and Budget, when the fiscal years moved to October. But this is the type of money that you would need to build what Apollo was built with Apollo. And so I think that, again, if you look at Casey Dreyer did a lot of research on that and pulled together, there's some really good graphs, and just he has a lot of data on that. If you go to the Planetary Society, I, I can look it up, but you might even be able to just look it up by the cost of Apollo, but it's just much more significant. And again, it doesn't, it isn't, I don't know that it's necessarily an argument in favor of doing that again. It's what, I think some of the arguments philosophically against it are that industry learned how to do this during the 60s and 70s. And they know how to do this. And I think arguably know how to do it better than the government. And that's one of the arguments against continuing to do this. And I think it is going to be very difficult. I think, a lot of people have said this is going to be the last human space flight system, spacecraft and rocket that the government, it's going to be the last one that the government owns and operates. And that, at some point we're going to transition the country as a nation, so to speak, even though considering how divided it is, but nevertheless, the next human spaceflight spacecraft and rockets that they use will be industry built and operated, and so they will just be essentially customers as opposed to operators of those. And obviously, with the cost being much less significant. And so that's the and that and again, I think if you look at not just Starbase but Kennedy Space Center and how much look at the infrastructure that SpaceX is building. Again, the Roberts Road, but again the Gigabay just at Kennedy Space Center. The it is private money, but it would be instructive to at least have an understanding of how much it costs to not just establish that infrastructure, but to maintain it. And again, you get into these discussions though about at some point does it become more cost effective to rebuild infrastructure rather than maintain it. It's like when it gets to a certain age. And again, we're seeing. I think I mentioned this earlier that these large companies that are still outlaying a lot of money are choosing to purpose build their infrastructure to the systems that they're going to fly now. And then again, they're also spending more money on it. But again, I think that part of that also is though that they're designing that infrastructure to be serviceable and maintainable, whereas the knowledge about some of those things didn't necessarily go into the vehicle assembly building and some of these structures. Now, these structures at the pad, like the lightning towers are I believe, the lightning towers are 21st century. Water tower is not. Water tower is 20th century. But generally speaking, again, I think it would be difficult, if not impossible, to persuade the government to demolish the vehicle assembly building. And again, you can say pros and cons, but I think what you see over time is, generally speaking, and you look at the some of the shuttle infrastructure, like the mobile launcher platforms, is there's just no use for that, and eventually those are demolished because they're just too big to be put into a museum. You can't move them to a museum. I mean, even the shuttle orbiters themselves were difficult to transport once you stopped having the money. So again, there's the whole, whatever you want to call what's going on with the shuttle Discovery, possibly being moved to a new site. There's that infrastructure has been gone for 15 years. So if they're going to do that, they're going to have to build something temporary to move it. So. It's a different philosophy. Although again, I think the industry has a lot more experience than they did in the 1960s, and so and they've done it more frequently, where they've moved from one to another. I mean, you could argue, like with United Launch Alliance, that they've maintained some of their infrastructure at Cape Canaveral, but that again may be another one of many sort of apples to oranges cases, because again, I don't know. Again, maybe there's when you get to when your level of investment it may just be appropriate for a level of investment to maintain your existing infrastructure versus a level of R&D investment that you're seeing with that Musk is investing in SpaceX and that Bezos is investing in Blue Origin. So, but it's one of those things, and unfortunately, I think it's a done deal, and so I think for this system, you just have to hope that they can increase their tempo of production and launch operations, because again, as somebody was saying, I mentioned it yesterday that this ICPS unit was delivered to the it wasn't delivered to the Kennedy Space Center, but it was delivered to the area, to the Cape Canaveral, in mid 2021. And so I remember actually there was a media event where they took us to see it at the HIF at Pad 37. I think that was in November of 2021. So it was, it had already been there for months, but that's a long time to sit in storage. And somebody was I have not verified this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it could very well be accurate, and probably is, but they said no Delta second stage. And this is, a lot of certainly the helium system, the pneumatic system is almost identical. Maybe they have some additional helium tanks on the stage, but the design itself is very similar. No stage sat in storage for 3 years before it flew even on a Delta IV, which had its own issues with pad campaigns, I guess is the best way to say it. So I think some of that, again, the system, I think they designed parts of this system for minimal maintenance. But the problem is again, when you start looking at time and cycle requirements, then if you're designing it for, you're designing it for an annual cadence as a minimum, and you can't hit that, then you just start ending up in this, you end up in a kind of maybe not a vicious cycle, but not a good cycle. And so again, it's pure speculation, but it's an obvious, you obviously wonder for even just a month's time if they had, if they had not had the hydrogen leak on the first wet dress rehearsal and had been able to make launch attempts in early February, whether this issue would have ever come up. It would have, they would have launched before it came up. Or if they had been ready to launch a couple of years ago, would this have come up? Is it a function of just being, the stage being hanging around for a long, long time before it's used? So. So let me see but yeah, if you have, go ahead. If anybody has any more questions, go ahead and throw those in chat. I'm just going to kind of look around here and see if it does look like, just take a quick peek at the I think this is a live shot. It does look like part of the engine, or either one of the engine or booster service platforms. It does look like some of those are being raised, or that work is in progress. Just looking around to see if there's anything else that I wanted to throw out there today. I think I already went through all of that stuff. And so at this point, but I think, we can just, let me see if I catch up here. Well, Blue Origin has they have a decent amount of infrastructure. It's all built. A lot of it is built. It's not offsite. It is actually on Kennedy Space Center property, but there's a lot of it concentrated in that area around the industrial area. So it's actually it's adjacent to the main visitor complex, visitor center site around there. You actually have to when I drive onto the press site, you have to go pick up badges at it's called PIDS, but or the just main badging office. You end up depending on which way you're coming from, you end up having to drive right past a lot of the Blue Origin facilities. But then I think they also have the there's a couple of lunar plants. I don't remember. I don't know if those are there or actually adjacent to Port Canaveral, and if so, then that means they have multiple industrial sites, either Cape Canaveral and or Kennedy Space Center, and then obviously the infrastructure at Pad 36. So they actually have a decent amount of infrastructure. It's just that it's not. We don't get to see it that much. I think people drive by it, but I don't know whether I don't know how much you're allowed to show. I think there's a certain amount of, if you take pictures and post them, somebody will politely ask you, I think, at first, but we just don't. I guess you can, but it sticks out like a sore thumb if you're there. I just don't know if it's the kind of thing you could live stream. But they do have a decent amount of infrastructure already. But then again, and there may be something to the point also though of when a building or a facility is no longer useful, you might be best served to get rid of it and reuse the site space for something else. I mean, that's not free, but again, if you just look at the numbers, is it better to, can we repurpose these facilities and these buildings, or is it or is it more cost effective? And maybe it isn't cost effective after a year. Maybe it's cost effective after 3 years. Maybe it's significantly better cost of more favorable after X number of years. It might not be right away, but it might be. Again, you might pay a little bit more up front, but then it's the same sort of basic question of, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. If something, again, it is what for the things that Congress doesn't want to spend money on. They're very allergic to high upfront costs. So again, the Apollo. That's why I call the funding in Apollo. That's why I call this the Apollo singularity, because I don't think I'll be alive the next time they spend money on NASA this way. And again, I won't be. I wouldn't be surprised if it never happens again. It only was ever going to happen once, and that's it. So. That's the kind of thing that business and industry, well, not all of industry, but that's the kind of thing, if you have the means to do that. And again, it's, to be fair, not very many people or organizations have that kind of means, but if given the means and the will, that's the fastest way to get something done. It isn't maybe necessarily the most cost effective, but it's the fastest way to get things done. So. Yeah, and so right again, and then the EPOC stands for, I believe it stands for Exploration, Production, and Operations Contract, and it was supposed to be the contract that so Anthony's talking about this. It was supposed to be a contract for this consortium or joint venture between Boeing and Northrop Grumman to eventually take over operations, obviously production and operations of all of the SLS program functions. And so it wouldn't even be the exploration ground systems infrastructure. It would just be SLS. But as he's saying in chat, what seemed to happen either after Artemis 1 or maybe even before Artemis 1, perhaps the turning point there was, although maybe it didn't, again, things run on parallel tracks, but again, the situation, the way I understand it, or the way, things seem to be in a more difficult place for the Boeings and some of those companies after COVID. The supply chain shock due to COVID. In some cases, a lot of that stuff didn't come back, and they haven't necessarily adapted that well to it. And so I think what Anthony's saying, or my feeling is that whatever enthusiasm Boeing and Northrop Grumman had, the joint venture is called Deep Space Transport, or it was. It's an LLC, but whatever enthusiasm they had is probably mostly or completely gone at this point. And so, yeah, I don't think the idea was they take that over and they would, we never got to really see what the financial run out was, because there was going to be some flavor of the way the shuttle program was funded and operated. So NASA still maintained insight and oversight to shuttle, but then there was this company called the United Space Alliance, which did all the hands-on work for shuttle. And so, but then the money pretty much all came from, it was still completely funded by again, this is the type of stuff that came up post shuttle. Like, I don't know how much skin in the game USA actually had, or if they did at all, because you were still seeing the shuttle budget from year to year was in that kind of $4 billion range. And now you see that pie wedge, so to speak, has been taken over by SLS, Orion, Exploration Ground Systems. So government's still spending, or government was still funding most of that. And so it was never totally clear with Epoch how much, I mean, the idea, which never happened with USA, to be fair, I think the one of the concepts of this was that they would reach a high enough production rate to, again, beginning with one a year, and we still aren't seeing that yet, but that the government would have dibs, so to speak, or they're paying as an anchor tenant. They would get one Artemis, they get one vehicle a year to fly one Artemis mission a year, and then anything above and beyond that, would have to be. I suppose the government can come back in and say, we also want another one. We're willing to pay for it, but that Boeing and Northrop Grumman would be able to offer surplus vehicles above that. So the couple of things they talked about above and beyond one a year were 1.5 a year, meaning that they would deliver 3 units in 2 years' time. That would give you again, surplus is not the right word, but it gives you this additional vehicle that you could sell to a potential customer. And so that's good in terms of bringing up the whole point of, so the other thing that's happened this decade, if not before the decade even started, and so again, also before COVID happened, but I think the market for SLS, is either I don't think there is a market for SLS anymore beyond Orion and NASA and Artemis. I don't, again, I just would be very surprised if anybody was willing to pay to use it. Again, the only other customer that would make sense given the amount of money and the interest, and maybe interest, but I guess I would also say, I don't know if that's the case anymore, would be, again, the department formerly known as Defense. But again, as I said, so you see these commercial systems that are being developed by the next decade. Especially if you're talking about a cargo SLS, I just don't know how it's going to compete with an uncrewed version of Starship or a uncrewed version of New Glenn in terms of delivering payloads. Again, maybe it has better performance on paper, but you just don't have the vehicles available to fly stuff. And so that's, again, it may not just be supply chain issues and costs. It may also just be that they're looking at the market for it now for SLS, and there just isn't one anymore above and beyond Orion. And so that's why it leads one to speculate, because they were talking about it into 2023, and then since the NASA Inspector General Office put out an audit report at the very beginning of fiscal year 2024. So this is like October 2023. We haven't heard a word from NASA without having to goose them. So I've asked a couple of times about status in 2024, but we haven't really heard anything from NASA about this since then. And so we're, it's going on 2 years and even longer if you talk about volunteering anything about it. And so when you don't hear anything, when they stop talking about it at all and are extremely reluctant to even answer questions about it, makes you wonder if it's dead. Yeah. And so, right. And so Anthony's talking about fixed price contracts. And that's the other thing we're seeing with the major defense contractors setting aside SpaceX, because SpaceX is a huge defense contractor now, but setting them aside, all of the 20th century, so to speak, the ones with the longer heritage, we've seen them, maybe not in the last year or so, but we were seeing them in the sort of the 2023, 2024 timeframe, talk about how bad firmed fixed price contracts were for them. And these are companies that are publicly traded. So they were becoming, they don't want to do fixed price contracts because the all of the risk is on the contractor. So I can, again, I've put up this slide a few times. I can certainly put up this chart, and you see it in government, you see it in government accounting, GAO reports, Inspector General reports. Let me see if I can find it. It's just useful to throw up on the screen in terms of just for context. Oh, went by it. So I think that's big enough. So this is a relatively old GAO report, relatively old being 2023. But again, you see the risk, the cost and performance risk. And so unfortunately we tend to talk only in extremes. So, this is the infamous cost plus extreme. So all of the cost and performance risk is on the government. And then this is the firm fixed price extreme. All of the cost and performance risk is on the contractor. And so you can see how a publicly traded company uh, could want to avoid some of those risks. Now, having said that, you do see uh, sort of internet age, 21st century tech companies who are willing to, again, no risk it, no biscuit, so to speak. It's like, the higher the risk, the higher reward theoretically. So again, you do see that sort of generational. Seems to be a generational difference in the willingness to take risks like this, because you do see again that this would be another one of those angles to this whole big picture thing is the level of risk that companies like, again, the older companies like the Boeings and the Lockheed Martins and the Northrop Grummans that are still around after all the consolidation from 20th century, mostly, versus some of the 21st century companies that come out of the internet and the different cycles that those have gone through, and you see a more willingness to take on, at least again, and I guess it's my perception of it, is more willingness to take on upfront financial risks because in the name of bigger rewards. And so, I think SpaceX would also be an example of that. So. Let's see. So where are we? I'm not too far behind, but I guess I'm still catching up. So somebody's asking about RS-25. I don't think we will see another application for the engine. There was again, there was a DARPA project called the XSP. I'm trying to remember, experimental space plane. So they looked at a concept that would use a earlier generation sort of taking surplus space shuttle main engine hardware that had been phased out of shuttle. So the space shuttle main engine went through several upgrade cycles. So phase one. Block 1, Block 2A, Block 2. And so at the end of the shuttle program, they'd moved to either Block 2A or Block 2. But Rocketdyne in its different incarnations had retained a lot of these, since it was reusable hardware, had retained a lot of the Phase 1, Block 1, Block 2A hardware. And so they had a program called AR-22 that engine would have flown in this. It wouldn't have been a single staged orbit. It just would have been a ground launched first stage, horizontal launched first stage, if I recall. Or, well, I guess it wasn't horizontally launched, but you can go look it up. The long and short of it is, they did one demonstration with an engine. They were also going to operate it at lower performance. So Shuttle ended up running at like 104 to 104.5%. They were going to run a single engine in this experimental space plane at 100%. And I think the runtime was also significantly less than 8 minutes. But anyway, what ended up happening very quickly after they did a test at Stennis where they took one of these engines and fired it once a day for 10 days straight in order to just get a sense of that challenge, and they were able to demonstrate that. But I think even pre-COVID, the Boeing was the prime contractor for that DARPA project, and they, again, in that 2019 timeframe was when a whole bunch of financial stuff hit them, and they basically just backed out of it. And so that project imploded, and that took the AR-22 with it. And so I don't think that we'll see anything like that. This is essentially end of last decade. It was, again, pre-COVID. I think some of it isn't that isn't the only reason that they're not going to do this, but it's just the industry's changed, the world's changed, and so I just don't think I wouldn't expect them to. I wouldn't expect another application for it besides this vehicle that we're looking at. We're still so I don't think things have, at least the public status of exploration upper stage production, so to speak, or assembly and test, isn't. I don't think it's changed much. Again, because there's been so much. There's been this. We've been sort of been waiting for Artemis II to launch this for in January and February and maybe to some extent March, and I think we saw Jared Isaacman hint at some sort of a briefing. He was talking about doing that next week that talked about what's beyond Artemis II. But I think maybe now that this has slipped out and March is sort of open, maybe we will get some more updates on what's supposed to happen after Artemis II. But we don't have a lot of updates on exploration upper stage. The structural test article, all of the elements of that had been structurally assembled except for the liquid hydrogen tank, that we were still waiting for. There's 2 welds. There's they have the LH2 tank for EUS is 2 domes and a short barrel. So they have to do a dome to barrel weld and a barrel to dome weld, forward dome to barrel, barrel to aft dome, and then there's some. But that I think would be the last structural assembly for the stage. There is also the inner stage element that needs to be welded though, and again, some of this stuff we just haven't got the opportunity to really dig into what exactly they're going to be doing for the structural test campaign, and whether both. I tried to ask and kind of gotten a not exactly definitive answer. Do you need both the interstage STA and the EUS STA? Would those need to be, or was the desire to ship those at the same time? Because then, there's the interstage is a much simpler article. It's basically, I think it's 2 barrels and 2 rings on either end. But we have not heard the status of that. But again, it's also it's a simpler. Again, it's barrel to barrel and then ring to barrel welds in the big welding tool at Machute Assembly Facility. And then they started talking about doing some welds for the flight article. But it's again, we just considering that, there's so many things up in the air at this point. It's like, there's just a lot of questions. So we don't know what the Artemis IV date is now. Cause again, you go back to what I was talking about yesterday about, so if Artemis III is now end of 2028, that's already later than the target date for Artemis IV. So what happens to Artemis IV? Nobody's talking about that. And it isn't because nobody's asking. I think maybe we will see a new manifest after this. Maybe I don't know if that's what they're talking about, but we don't know when Artemis IV is supposed to fly. We don't have a real good status of, for instance, things like IHAB, but there's all of those elements of the Block 1B vehicle that we're aware of, but we just don't know where they are at this point. So I don't think they're a critical path, but things like the the universal stage adapter, that's also going to go through that there's going to be a structural test campaign for that, and then a flight unit for that. EUS obviously they need to finish the structural test article and then test that at Marshall. They need to they need to finish the flight article, which is going to take more work than the structural test article, and then that has to go to Stennis for the green run. We've seen some updates on the test stand at Stennis to be ready, but we really don't have any. We do not have a good idea about when either the STA or the flight article are supposed to be done at this point. I mean, the last sort of idea was over a year ago, and so then at that point they were talking about the STA going to Marshall this year, and then the flight article going to Stennis like end of this year, early next. But the problem is like, again, based on what we've seen, I would say those dates are either highly or completely, either highly optimistic or completely aspirational at this point. Again, I would just like to, if they're realistic, can we see some information to speak to that? We haven't got anything, so that's the problem. Again, it isn't just SpaceX and Blue Origin that we're having issues getting information from. It's across these programs. We just, and again, how proprietary is schedule? It isn't. It's not proprietary. I can understand why they want to keep it quiet, especially if it's not good news. But I don't know that I would call that proprietary or intellectual property. Good for business, bad for business, sure, but not necessarily illegal to share. Yeah, I mean that I think there was some rumors again. Chris Bergen with NASA Spaceflight, I think had heard about something towards the end of the program, but I don't. I think it would have been tricky to try and completely take over all of that to completely transfer it. Just like it'll be tricky because it's a government transferring government authority to private. And I don't think you see a lot of private companies that are all that excited about doing that. I think most of them would prefer, again, to just start from scratch, rather than trying to take over the authority from the government, because you're still going to have to deal with regulations and bureaucracy to do that transition. And so, yeah, I think the question would have been, obviously would have wanted to see some details about the implementation, but then how long do you really think that would have worked for? What are your long-term thoughts? Because if you recall, there were a lot of shuttle upgrades that were basically just thrown in the trash can when after Columbia. They just, again, it's like, well, we're just going to fly the vehicles long enough to build enough of the space station so that it can then be serviced by something else. But we're going to retire it before. If you recall, the Columbia Accident Investigation Board put in, I can't remember if they made it a requirement, but they sort of strongly emphasized that if you were going to fly shuttle past 2010 into the next decade after that accident, that they would have had to recertify the design again. And that I think that was enough for the powers that be, in addition to the accident itself, to say, okay, let's retire it. So, yeah, I wonder. So those upgrades would have been important in terms of long-term serviceability. Making things like the orbiter, going to electric APUs for the orbiters. 5-segment, they were talking about maybe 5-segment boosters for shuttle at the time for more performance. They probably were, again, there were a lot of upgrades to the space shuttle main engines that they wanted to do for for additional safety margins, and also some of the things that they talked about with RS-25. It's like a lot of the manufacturing for space shuttle main engines were again 20th century, and even Rocketdyne had now moved on to more modern manufacturing techniques, just because it was less expensive to maintain the equipment, less expensive to produce the parts, et cetera, et cetera. So would somebody taking that over be willing to look again? If maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but they were talking about Shuttle 2020 back at that time. So early 2000s, they were talking about Shuttle flying out to 2020. So that would have been one of those questions that you would have wanted to ask whoever that benefactor was going to be, is what's your time horizon for this? How long are you planning on flying this vehicle? Are you willing to fly it for another decade? So. The Orion, I mean, we did get one graphic, but I think it was out of date. And I know I did an abort modes video, but it was based on this old data. I can bring the graphic up. The launch abort system modes, I think, line up very similarly to the Apollo command service module abort modes. So again, I'll put this graphic up, but again, this is probably not a good one to. Let me see if I can find. Well, no, is that? Well, I guess this might work. I hope this will work. There's a couple of visuals here. No, I gotta close it. Gotta close it and come back. This might not be the right. Let's see. Well, let's go backwards here. So, mode 1 aborts. Again, mode 1 alpha, mode 1 bravo, mode 1 Charlie, similar type of thing where, again, pad abort or low altitude abort. And again, this is interesting because it's just, they talk about straight to mains. So, low altitude abort, like a pad abort, where, I mean, as soon as the jettison motor fires, you're deploying the parachutes. The main parachutes, and the drogues don't hang on for very long, but then you get the higher altitude you get, the better the more flexibility you have, the more time you have to react. So again, I think goes, the first one's mode 1 alpha, then mid altitudes mode 1 bravo, mode 1 Charlie, and then mode 2 is this untargeted abort splashdown. It's just it's basically separate completely from both stages. You're trying to you want to splash down before, again, as it says, you want to splash down before you get, before your trajectory starts to go over Africa. And then so now I guess these are a little bit newer, but then you have these mode 4, mode 5 aborts where you can depending on where the abort's declared, whether you're on the core stage or on the ICPS, because you could also have a low performance core stage and then have to use ICPS to reach orbit, or to give yourself better abort options. But you could do like an abort once around, or you could do, you could abort, or you could do something called something like an abort to orbit, and maybe make a single or make an orbit or two in low Earth orbit, and then re-enter, do a deorbit burn. Pardon me, and then re-enter and splash down. So it's similar to. It's similar to Apollo, because the architecture is somewhat similar to Apollo. So yeah, it is a good. Somebody was asking. I think I went by it. Did I go by it or? Yeah, somebody was asking. I wonder when we'll hear about SpaceX's HLS acceleration. Me too. Actually, would like to hear both of them. To be fair, neither of them have really said. I've heard some rumors, but you know, I I don't know how much stock, how much value to put in them. And so yeah, like again, I mean, so we'll see. I think that is one of the things here. Again, let me see if I can find the. I don't know if I have the Jared Isaacman, the was it at, I can't remember if it was at the um if it was in his post. It was one of his posts yesterday, I believe. I don't. I think that the issue is do I have that over here or not? Because I don't have. I do not have one of those accounts, and we can no longer just go in. I guess I can use the only way I can do this is to use the. I can use the sites that allow, what is it, knitter. So if we go, at least in theory, but like, yeah, this is not, um, yeah, just not a big, too many downsides to, the costs outweigh the benefits to social media and I'm just old. So there's that. But you can see down here, this is before they said there was going to be an Artemis II briefing. Please expect a more extensive briefing later this week as we outline the path forward, not just for Artemis II, but for subsequent missions, et cetera, et cetera. Don't know what that means. But now that we have another more than month to before Artemis II, and again you can apply this to Orion and SLS just as much as anything else, but it's like now, Artemis, Artemis 2. So like the mission availability calendar, I chopped, if you look at the actual PDFs, do I have that here? Right? Yeah, I do. So it's like, the mission, they still say early 2026, but I think it's getting hard to argue for me that it's getting hard to argue that April is early 2026 anymore. And so if you think about, I don't know how much of the process, how long it takes to do all of the post-flight assessment reviews, but it's going to take a few months. So even if this mission flies in early April, the programs are going to be crunching on the numbers probably into the second half of this year. And so that doesn't necessarily mean, again, maybe that's not the critical path. It probably isn't. But I think just getting out to here and, maybe it, does it make it in April or does it take it out to May? The soonest that you could turn around and fly the next Orion SLS vehicle is just pushing farther are pushing closer to 2028 as it is. And so now your margins for your lunar lander, if you're again, if you're just going to, if it's, December 2028 or bust for the administration and for Artemis 3, it's getting, I think it's getting harder to, fly something in between that, unless somebody is willing to say that the Artemis 4 hardware is going to be ready by the end of 2028. And again, since they haven't said anything about that date, again, I spoke with somebody from the SLS program in Houston, and it's kind of scary now. So this is end of September, which is now going on. That's almost a half a year ago now. But she said there is a, what did she say? There's a schedule or something to the effect that they could still make the official date, which is still September 2028 for Artemis 4, even though if you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt for the phrase by 2028, then that, if you're going to give them the most time that possible, then that means that now Artemis 3 is officially after the Artemis 4 official date. And so it's more than just a disconnect. There are a lot of disconnects there. And so that's why it just, again, there are definitely pros and cons in terms of trying to increase the cadence for Orion and SLS. It's just, you can't just talk about the next one because of the lunar landing goal. It's like, okay, if we have two vehicles, that we know are going to be ready, that can fly the mission, not necessarily both at the same time, but it's like, if we know we're going to have two more vehicles after the one that's sitting on the pad right now, by the end of the decade, or by the end of 2028, I should say, if they have a lot of confidence in that, and then it's like, okay, then we can fly something else. But I just think it gets harder and harder the farther into 2026 this mission goes, and we're already 2 months doesn't seem too bad, I suppose, but I mean, how many months are there, between now and the end of 2028? You've got 24 and maybe 33 months. And so, 2 months doesn't sound like a lot, but it becomes a relatively large fraction of 33. So, and again, so is Gateway still, if Gateway's end of 2027, I mean, that's a long ways away. Like, that's supposed to launch. I mean, if Gateway launches in December 2027 and the lunar lander is supposed to be, and Artemis 3 is supposed to be either done or in flight at the end of 2028, then that means, which has been the plan, that Artemis 3 and the lunar landing mission will complete before the Gateway, before those two before the PPE and the Halo are in orbit, are in the Gateway orbit. So they'll still be on the way at the end of 2028 if they launch at the end of 2027. So, it's and so, yeah, I mean, that's this rhetorical question of what is the current, what is a relatively current but also relatively detailed status of Artemis 3 and Artemis 4. So, I mean, again, and then once you do that, maybe with the exception maybe of Orion, you have a lot of, all of these different programs have a lot of stuff, so to speak, that they have to finish. And so, SLS has got to finish Block 1B, EGS has got to finish Mobile Launcher 2. Obviously, again, so then you've got HLS has got to finish at least 1 or 2 lunar landers, and the space, again, the spacesuits, maybe there seems to be a little bit more confidence in that. But I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that needs to happen, and we just don't know. We're really in the dark about the status of Artemis III and Artemis IV, and we just aren't getting. It's like now that this mission has been delayed into April, it's too close to the end of the quarter. Like, so April 1st would be the very first day of the second quarter of 2020, the calendar year 2026. So I've been trying to do these quarter end videos, but I've been, I'm losing the motivation to do them. It continues to go down because there's less and less information, or there's less and less new information from quarter to quarter. Especially in this case, if you take out Artemis II, we have a couple of we just got a couple of pictures of. I was showing it on the channel members. There was a. Let me see if I can find it. We saw some pictures of the Artemis III and Artemis IV Orion service modules in the IOZ, in the industrial operations zone. So where Lockheed Martin is putting those together. I wonder if they're all here, because if they are, then I can. Probably. So just for grins, but this is not telling us. I'll close this and see if I can. Does it switch to this? Hey, we lucked out. So, right. So this is the Artemis III service module. So, crew module adapter, European service module mated. No spacecraft adapter yet. That has not been attached. So, and again, the fact that it's this low to the floor means that they haven't attached the OMS engine nozzle. So that's that one. And that's another shot of it. And then this is the Artemis IV service module, although with the, I'm glad they took the picture with the dignitaries, but as I said, I'm looking at the hardware because we don't get to see it very often. We did see the European service module was built. So this is in the lift station in operations checkout building. The industrial operations, there's a lot of things in there. Industrial operations zone is Lockheed Martin's assembly and test facility inside the building. And then you have other things like crew quarters and so on and so forth. This is the lift station in the IOZ. This is where they will stack the crew module and the heat shield. That's one of the things that's coming up. Right now, this says they're getting ready to stack the Artemis IV crew module adapter and the Artemis IV European service module. But obviously, conspicuously absent is the crew modules for both Artemis III and Artemis IV, and then technically also Artemis V. So, but it's like, this is pretty much, I think, all that we've gotten for the first 2 months of the year. Are just these pictures with very little. In the picture description for this one, it does mention that they're getting ready to do this physical mate, but we really don't have and then maybe a sentence from Amit Kshatriya at a press conference about 3 weeks ago. He just gave us a little bit of a hint about where the Artemis III, SLS, and Orion builds are. So it's just like, we just I'm going to need to be sold on the idea of transparency for Artemis III and Artemis IV, because right now it's the opposite. It's just secrecy. So, and I think, but one of the things, what it looks like though, is because they're running out of time, the calendar doesn't stop, and the calendar is the favorite to win this race against both China and the United States to the moon. But there's we don't, because there's not a lot of time left. Maybe they have to address this, and I'm sure that they've been talking about it behind the scenes, but they don't say anything out in public. Are they going to now say something in public? I hope so. But then right behind that becomes the question of, okay, let's drill down into this and sanity check some of it. I don't know if they're going to be willing to do that. And so I won't just be interested in, I will be interested in if they change the mission plans and they give us a new manifest and new dates. And so if they change the missions that they're going to fly for the rest of the decade, so it's not only Artemis 3 and Artemis 4, or it's not both of them, and it's Artemis 2.5 or 3.5 or whatever, what are the details there, And we still, again, we aren't getting refreshes on any of the details for Artemis 3 or Artemis 4. So again, if we want to, we'll flip it around here. So again, we don't have a good integrated milestone schedule for Block 1B, for Mobile Launcher 2. And then for Artemis 3, we don't have a good one for Starship, whatever the hell Blue Moon is going to be for Artemis 3. And then there's at least a little bit of uncertainty, if not a decent amount of uncertainty, about the Orion build and the SLS core stage build in terms of when exactly those are supposed to be DD-250'd over to exploration ground systems. We don't have schedules, and we don't have status for any of this stuff to any level of detail at all. And the thing is, if they were to give that to us here at the end of February 2026, how long is that fresh? It's like, if you're only going to tell us this once this year, it's okay. That's better than nothing, but all of that information gets stale very quickly depending on what happens with your next milestone. So yeah, I'm highly skeptical about what we're going to get. I'm not going to say, obviously not going to say no or say that it's nothing, but I'm skeptical about how much information and how much detail we're going to get, and then how frequently we're going to get it going forward. Because it isn't just, Artemis has provided updates to the media since Artemis 1. It's just you can count them almost on one hand in the last 3 years. Just doing updates is not enough to say you're being transparent. It's how often you do them and how detailed they are, amongst other things. So I think, yeah, I hope they do this briefing. I hope we get something. It'll at least be something, but, and we can, there's going to be a lot, there's certainly going to be 4 weeks to talk about it if they do give us something here in the next couple of weeks about what they're thinking about beyond Artemis 2. But, I'm looking for, I see the question about, do you think they will consider adding better pad access? I just don't think they don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the money or the commitment to do that. The way to deal with this is to fly the vehicle more frequently, so you don't leave these machines in storage for so long. Especially complicated machines like ICPS or again, the ICP, it's just been in storage for several years. And again, I don't know how long I don't know that there's any alternative to, you just have to store it and hope. Maybe you do some additional checks and additional servicing and maintenance checks on it. But I think they're basically reliant on this minimal infrastructure for launching Orion and SLS. And I don't think it's, I don't know how many platforms, how many of these platforms you can hang off of the umbilical tower. You're just better off. Well, that's not a good way of putting it. Their options are very limited. And so I don't think, I'm sure they would consider it, but it's just the consideration is resources. And we just saw what they did to, NASA. They just cut 20% of their workforce last year. So, if you're not willing to pay for that, and what other infrastructure are you willing to pay for? And so I think, again, the government is moving away from owning and operating their own infrastructure. And so I don't know, you just end up with these odd cross currents, because yes, at the same time as you have that big theme, you still have Congress saying they don't want to throw this away. And they have valid reasons for that, because there is no alternative. But at the same time, they're not investing. They're not doing. They're not investing in it. They're just basically saying, "Here's money." But it's like, again, they didn't invest in it in the first place, and so the time to invest in infrastructure was 15 years ago, and that was during the last austerity, or maybe the first austerity wave. And so the budgets for these programs were half. Like, so the SLS budget, I think back in like when the SLS program started, it was half of what it became. It was like $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion, and then by the end of the decade, it had gone up over $2 billion, and I think it got up to close to $2.5 billion. But it's too late. It's, now it's going to cost. Now it cost a lot more to retrofit than to design it in at the beginning. So I don't think they're going to do. I don't think we're going to see a lot of, because like this, the contingency pad access is already 2 platforms. So what are you just going to hang like 8 platforms off of the umbilical tower? And the thing is that you have to use a crane to do all of those, and those lifts, you get stuck with all of that stuff hanging on the mobile launcher. How long does it take to take all of those off? For instance, in the summertime when you have thunderstorms every afternoon. So it wasn't necessarily that it wasn't well thought through, but it's just minimal infrastructure. So I think, I do think there's, like somebody was saying, yeah, I don't know what they're going to do then in terms of, saying that they won't delay Artemis III until the lander's ready. I don't know. Again, what are their options? What options do they have? And the thing is that, again, the next Orion and SLS, when are those going to be ready? Because it's a little bit now. It's a combination of when's the hardware going to be ready to fly, and when are the programs going to be ready to fly. And, somebody finally asked, and it wasn't because the question hasn't been there, but somebody was asking about when are you going to name a crew for Artemis III? So if you were to use the 18 months that I was given as a minimum, I don't even know if, I'm not even sure the programs are going to be ready to turn around. If you were to name the crew today for the next mission and whatever it is, and you had a minimum of 18 months, I'm not sure that the programs will be ready to turn around with the post-flight that they need to do, and some of anything else that they need to address post-Artemis II and be ready to fly in 18 months. If you said it's 2 years, now you're already talking about end of first quarter, second quarter of 2028, and you're already right there, running up against their drop dead date of by the end of 2028. And so you might not wait for the lunar lander, but the problem is that you probably have to acknowledge, and I don't know that they're going to be willing to do this, you would have to acknowledge that the lunar lander isn't going to be there by the end of 2028. As long as they're going to have faith that that there will be 1 or 2 lunar landers available by the end of 2028, and the farther that Artemis II slides into 2026, the higher the chances that their choices are going to be either there aren't going to be a lot of choices besides waiting until the end of 2028. So we'll see. That's just my thought. That's my thought, is they're getting squeezed. There's just not. There either isn't enough time to do anything else, or they have to acknowledge that the lunar landers aren't going to be ready by the, and I just don't think they're going to be willing to do that. So. So, I mean, we will have a lot of time to talk about this, but I am going to have to. I wanted to come on and kind of just sort of lay out what I'm thinking about. These are some of the steps that need to happen for this vehicle to all the the additional work that's now going to have to happen before it can launch. Getting ready to roll back, VAB maintenance, roll back out to the pad, second pad flow. Are we going to do another tanking test? Are we going to remate the tail service mast umbilicals? And then we'll have more. There'll certainly be more time to talk about Artemis III and Artemis IV. And in fact, again, as we're getting some hints now that we might actually get to talk about it before Artemis II flies now. But we'll have time to talk about that. And I'm more than willing to do both at, in the relatively same amount of time. It is possible to cover both Artemis II and whatever they're talking about doing after Artemis II, and, in the same space of time. And so I'm hoping we're going to get some clarity on what happens after Artemis II, or at least what the plan is, because at this point we don't, there's a lot of questions and conflicts in those plans. But we can come back and talk about that again next time. So I'm going to go ahead and thanks as always for tuning in. Thanks to members of the channel, and also just again, people have been nice enough, and I'm trying not to hard sell my some of this stuff that I'm doing, but I really appreciate the people who've made donations to my Buy Me a Coffee page. And of course, as I say this, the stream is is flagging out. So let's see if it comes back. All right, it sort of come back. It looked like I went off, but I did. If that didn't go through, hopefully this will go through it again. I wanted to thank folks who've been channel members, and folks who have made some contributions and donations through the Buy Me a Coffee page, because I really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll be able to cover Artemis II on site, and then if for instance, I am talking to SLS about when they roll the Artemis III 4/5 out of New Orleans, if they let me go to that, I will go to that, unless it's obviously coincident with Artemis II. But I plan on using this funding to cover Artemis as much as I can. So I do appreciate it. Thanks for the heads up. I'm just watching here in OBS. I did get a warning from YouTube, and I saw the thing drop down there, sag for a second. But anyway, at least we got this far. So thanks again, and thanks for the donations. Thanks for your time, and we will do this again relatively soon. Hopefully we'll see. Hopefully we will see Artist 2 back out on the pad relatively soon as well. And so again, thanks for your time, everybody, and I will see you next time.